Today we're going to talk about PUP and how it came to be and why I made it to begin with. It's kind of an interesting journey, particularly as kind of the world got used to LLMs, all the excitement. MCP specification was like at its infancy. And my own venture to like trying to use Datadog to do my job on a day-to-day basis. We have a lot of telemetry, and I needed a way to do my own reports, my own analysis of problems that we're trying to solve. A little bit about me, like I run our internal SDLC here at Datadog, so how we build software. It's important to know how AI is using that software and what impact it's having at Datadog.
Totally. So how did you get started? What was kind of the idea in your mind? Like I'm sure there were a few things that you tried that maybe worked, didn't work. What did that look like?
So actually the root problem that I was trying to solve was like, hey, what agents are people using? How often are they using them? How much is it costing? What issues are they running into with their CLIs? Like, what is that doing to our PR metrics, DORA metrics? Is it we going faster in reviews? Are we going slower in reviews? And so like this was the core problem that I was like trying to investigate. Now at this time also like our MCP didn't have these features. So it was kind of like I can click around in our UI and try to find some of this stuff. Or like I can give an agent, read access to some of this data and then start to help me like pull that data down, create a deterministic script to like do this repeatedly over time if I'm going to kind of report on this month over month. And that was the original goal.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like maybe my naive approach to something like this would be, hey, if I'm talking with an agent, it might reach out to something like Perl to use the API and then maybe ask me for keys and things like that. Again, I say this is a naive approach because I think I can pull up like a Postman kind of definition of APIs and maybe give that to my agent, but it feels like that might be a lot of context or a waste of time. Or is it worth like making that part of my agent? Like how do you attack these problems, or what does the CLI solve in this case?
Yeah, so I think in like many cases for like products that are out there that have a very small API service, this is totally sufficient. If you've seen Datadog, we have lots of products, lots of features, lots of APIs. We have over 4,000 APIs, and that continues to grow quite quickly. And so this is kind of where I started. I was like, well, we have this thing called our Datadog API spec. It's actually public. There's a lot in there, right? There's a lot in there. And so comically, what I did was say like, hey, agent, look at that like spec directory and then like kind of figure it out yourself. The very naive approach was also just experimenting of like, hey, these like code exec styles, like does it lead to the same results? And so my agent picked it up, it read through it. It definitely stumbled a lot. I had to give it our API app keys. I scoped them down to read only, obviously, but like, I had to give it a lot of keys, and then I still had to tell it how to use the Datadog APIs because it wasn't necessarily obvious from the spec, at least the way the agents interpret it. Now, this was over several sessions. And so then what I started noticing was the agent was starting to write Python scripts, Node scripts, like just a combination thereof for questions I was asking. It made sense. Just the way the agents behave, they tend to like wrap things in scripts. And then from there, as it discovered, issues, paginating logs, paginating some metric data over long history for fine-grained data access, it kind of kept running into the same stumbling blocks. And then, I see what went wrong here. Let's try to fix this. So over time, I noticed it started building a very large Node script around our APIs from our specs. And this Node script came out to be, I think, on the order of like 1,500 lines when I finally looked at it. And I was like, well, I'm only using like maybe 15 features in Datadog right now. And this is what it's created. And I was like, okay, cool. So, I look at that and I'm like, it's a CLI. That's what it is. It's trying to deal with the nuances of how different APIs paginate, the way our auth works, how to handle certain failure modes like uniformly, and then what to do to like reformat it in a way that's like, I guess, easy for the AI to understand. And most of it was like, you know, JSON to JSON dump. Interestingly, it did do its own wrapping around like, did the overall success happen or did it fail, and here's why, and try to remove the like standard error codes nuance. It also added retries built in for some things too, which I thought was interesting and totally unnecessary, but yes.
That's so cool. So I wonder if you could show us PUP quickly, and then I've got a lot more questions about Node and Codebase.
Yeah, so PUP, I have the latest version as of this morning that was released last night. And so PUP is just a simple CLI tool. You can install it from Brew or from our GitHub releases page. And so PUP itself has quite a bit of commands. You can see kind of here, you know, you can get your APM data, you can talk to bits, you can, you know, query, create, edit dashboards, you can query metrics, logs, monitors, reference tables, you know, the whole gamut of things are here.
Right.
And so all it is a very deterministic approach of what my agent was really doing. And that's how PUP was born. I wanted to like, hey, I want access to a lot more things because I'm going to be querying a lot more as my, like, you know, investigation starts to go down. But also I noticed a lot of Datadog engineers were running into the same problem. They needed to query their data for whatever purpose they were doing, and they wanted it to be in a deterministic way. And a lot of people also use our MCP, and it's helped them in many ways too, and similar. And so this was kind of the focal point, though, that I had is I wanted determinism, like extreme determinism. If I run the same command, it should give me the same results. And that's what primarily I was seeking out of this. And so PUP it has a few things. It actually has some cool like extensions that you can do. So you're kind of getting the preview of I was doing some stuff for profiling before I, you know, maybe talk to the team to upskill it to a proper command tier. You can even do org switching. You can even use JQ commands to kind of pull those things out. I think what's something that's interesting in PUP is you're seeing the human view of what it produces output. But I noticed agents, they will like, you know, iterate over the help files until they find what they want. And one of the things was that, well, you know, maybe there's a way to like make that faster out of the gate on the theory that as what I was seeing with the MCP trend was going is if you give it a big dump, it can actually do selective filtering on its own. So it doesn't actually eat your entire context. And so I was leaning into that development in and of itself. And that's where there's this agent mode. So if I do the same thing like agent help, you're going to notice a radically different results. And so this is auto-detected, by the way, when you're using PUP if you're in agent mode. And so this is kind of neat, right? Because not only can you look at like, you know, okay, well, what am I doing? I'm looking at some user service accounts and the app key, and then there's a create option itself. There's a file that's also required as well. You can delete them. You can delete them by API key IDs. So like, it actually is very descriptive in a very JSON schema like topology of like what's like useful. Now the agents I've noticed have like grasped onto this quite well, and there's a higher success of getting the command right the first time instead of, you know, stumbling over it over again. This is like particularly true when you have options of like an enum style. If you list those out, it doesn't have to guess at the thing until it gets it wrong. You can get an idea. It also includes examples. So, you know, if you want to find these things, it gives you some examples on how to use our query syntax in a way that it understands. So like, right, if I did PUP traces aggregate by this API service, and I wanted the P99 by its resource, it would give me the results. Now, we don't have anything called this at Datadog, so this command won't work for me, but contextually, like you could say like, hey, I'm working on the, you know, the web app service, and let's go find that information.
That's really cool. So I wonder about all of these commands. So the arguments and the command itself. I guess maybe in my brain, I'm thinking about like token usage or ways to minimize token usage. Yep. And I feel like one of the things you said already is like getting it right the first time means that you don't need to retry, which means that you're spending less tokens. Is there any thought gone into like PUP the name? Is there a reason why it's so short? Or like some of those commands, is there like a test or an eval that we can do to figure out if they're being triggered or not triggered? Or does that not even matter because it's the CLI?
It does matter to a degree.
Okay.
So why pup so short? One, I wanted a fairly short name. It just so happens we've already used the name DD several places, externally and internally. It could be easily confused. There is also an older version of our CLI that like hasn't, we've kind of mostly deprecated. It has a bunch of features that are very old too, that aren't very useful. And so I wanted something playful to do it. And this originally started as an internal project and then later became something public. So I used the name Pup because it was cute and we're a dog company. And so that was the premise of the name. It was short though and repeatable, because if you look at like the tools that agents use today, the ones that are very popular and easy to type out, it knows about. So it knows about Git, it knows about JQ, even though it tends to write a Python script, but whatever. Mm-hmm. It knows about GitHub, the GitHub CLI. So very, very common tools that are easy to recognize. It can pick up on quite well. Now, context usage, this is, again, where I was going back into, like, if you have deterministic output, your agents will actually understand the input outputs of this. It doesn't actually need to load all of this stuff in its context. It can actually, like, write its own scripting and post-processing stuff to minimize what it does. And so determinism here is more important to do that. And it's nice in that if you wanted to have the agent write you something repeatable, like a report, you already have the command, and therefore it knows how to write the proper like bash script or Python script or whatever to wrap around that.
Perfect. Now that you're talking about scripting languages, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the choice of the language itself. So it looked like it was written in Rust, but we were talking a bit about Node scripts before.
Yeah.
I will admit I went down this path a little bit, but I'm not great at Node, so I wasn't really confident in whatever CLI. I ended up playing a little bit with Go, but what did your development look like? What did that life cycle look like? Did it start off as Bash? Because I think that's where I started, and then I with Node and went from there.
Yeah, so obviously it just started with me talking to agent, running a bunch of Bash, Python, random Node, TypeScript command things it was doing. When I pointed at the spec, I actually pointed at our various SDKs, and I just said pick one, and it just chose either randomly the Python SDK or the TypeScript SDK. Ultimately, it converged on the TypeScript SDK for reasons I don't particularly understand why it chose that. I didn't really care, but like from the SDKs, they're all generated, so like technically they all should work. At that point, like once I started doing that, I was like, oh, okay, well, if I want to like make this portable as an easy install package, sure, I could continue the TypeScript like example it had, but I was looking at like, well, I want to do a bunch of cleanup in what it's doing here, and I originally chose Go. Why Go? Go's just a very popular language here at Datadog internally. And those tools like Go Release are out there that make this really easy to package up various ecosystems. So that's how it started, and that worked quite well for some time using our Go SDK that we generate. And at a certain point, though, there became more requests, particularly like for WASM. So some people wanted to embed it in the browser, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's see what the state of Go WASM support is. Well, at the time, it only supported WASI IP1, not WASI IP2, which actually introduced networking support. And there's, I believe, still ongoing discussions about waiting for the WASI IP3 spec and just skipping straight to that. So at that point, I looked at it and said, well, can't support that with that ecosystem right now, unless I do some of my own forks there. That wasn't something that I was willing to maintain myself. So at that point, I looked around and say like, okay, what other options exist that have that portability itself? And that's where, Rust came up to be. It has quite good support for various architectures, including WASM, and supported the WASI IP2 spec at that time. And so that was the next extension. And adding that was actually fairly straightforward, mostly adding a new build target and then dealing with some of the consequences around, things that are not in the WASI IP2 spec and just eluding them from the build.
Gotcha. That's super interesting that you ended up on the Rust side. And you mentioned multi-platform. So what platforms would like a tool like this work for? So I realize your agents are typically going to be like Mac, Linux, Windows, that kind of thing. But also I think if I'm making an agent, I might want to give Pup to that agent. So where could I run it?
So right now, anywhere, right? So like, the neat thing about WASM is it's fairly portable, right? So it actually doesn't matter what runtime you're in. You can execute some sort of WASM extension. Now, obviously, you can install it on your system and then call it directly out through a shell process like that. And so, yes, Linux, Windows, Mac, the primary targets. Obviously, Intel, like ARM settings, people various degrees. So make it available as much as possible to anyone that might want to use it, and also the source if they just want to build from source.
Oh, awesome. Is it open source? Sorry, I should have asked.
Oh yeah, totally open source, Datadog/pup. So GitHub/Datadog/pup. It's entirely open source. Yes, I still review a bunch of issues and review PRs myself. There is a whole team behind it, but yes, I'm still very involved because it's a passion of mine. And so that's, yes. So build targets. So one of the things that we were thinking about is like, should we embed this in, directly with some of the agents that exist? Maybe even the own systems that we're embedding with the Datadog of like, okay, let's just embed pup as a dependency chain that's like natively included in the agents that we're doing. And so, yeah, we could have done that again just by mass installing this across everybody's computers, everybody's sandbox environments, etc. It's perfectly fine option, but this gave us the flexibility to do that, and our customers the flexibility to do that themselves.
That's really cool. So a small little binary. I guess at the end of the day, the other thing is like, let's say I wanted to build my own tool like this, or my own CLI for an agent. What would be like? Are there maybe gotchas or things I should know before I go?
Yeah, there are a few. I think it's easy to add things to a CLI. I think it's more difficult, particularly as you've seen that pup has quite a few commands, right? And so like the one thing that I'm thinking about now is as this is growing is there's a lot here, and there's a lot of features. So one of the things that I've always been thinking about, and I've restructured pup's commands a few times now, is how do we want to organize this in a way that agents can navigate to most effectively? For humans, we tend to want to read things in an alphabetical order, in somewhat of a priority order. And so one of the things I'm thinking about is like, how do I get the most relevant, obvious information to an agent based on, common patterns that we see? And so a lot of Datadog customers use metrics and logs and traces, right? So like, realistically, those should probably be at the top of the list to see first to the agent themselves.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense. Any other gotchas that we should know about? Like, is Rust the de facto language? Should we look at something?
I don't think Rust is the de facto language. It's just a language that naturally done. The things that kind of one, we already had an SDK built for Rust in our ecosystem. Two, you have the ability in Rust to make fairly small binaries once it's compiled, and very targeted binaries. And so that, and the language itself has helped us identify some like obvious bugs that could have existed.
Right. Just in the syntax, the way Rust works itself with the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, like, it's a language choice. I could have done most of this in many other languages, ignoring the whole WASM setting, but I mean, you could have done it. So like, I think the thing is like, pick a language that meets all your requirements in a way that's like, gives you the ergonomics to do what you need to do. So even if I look at pup, it uses clap under the hood for its, management of things. That works great for the human mode, but I had to do some shenanigans and customization around the JSON output for the agent node.
Gotcha. Well, listen, that was fantastic. I'd love to start using pup. Where would I go to find it if I want to download it or install it?
Yeah. So the first thing that you would do is you would go to GitHub, GitHub/Datadog/pup. Inside that, you'll find out how to install pup. And so what you'll do is you'll do brew tap Datadog labs pack.
Okay.
You do this, and then you'll need to trust it. So brew trust. What was it? We're going to do the formula. So we're already trusted. I've already done this, but this is Brew's new trust method. But once you've done that, you can install pup. And hold on, I need to off this. There we go.
Fantastic. I was actually not aware of this trust. Thank you very much. I've learned something.
Yeah, so I'm already installed. It's already up to date.
Gotcha.
This is the easy way to install it. Once it's installed, you can obviously naturally upgrade it, but at least as of today, it should be 110.7 is a thing. And then the first thing that you'll want to do is pub auth login. I won't run that here. It will open up a website where you can choose your scopes if you want to read only, read write, whatever you want, certain access to certain things. You can also do that with like a org flag. This is just any name that you want to give. It's free text. But you could also say foo, like foo read only if you wanted, right? And with that, then you can even select different orgs if you have several different Datadog organizations that you want to query over time, and allows your agent then to discover those as well. So if I do the auth status, let me off this real quick, you can see that like my main one, I actually do let it have access to many things in this particular organization. And the puff and the like auth is already re-authenticated. So it will self-refresh what it needs on demand. Now, there is a lifetime to these things naturally. So at a certain point, you will have to do the login, but I'm sure Stephen maybe will explain that in another episode.
That is great. Thank you so much for that overview. I look forward to like making my own CLI for handling APIs and instead of making sure that it's deterministic. I think the main problem that I have when trying to write like a skills or some other command or something like that is that it doesn't always fire, it doesn't always give me back the same result. And I look forward to some determinism when dealing with external APIs. Thank you so much. That was a great tour.